Do y'all remember when we were supposed to have superpowers? On December 21st, 2021, an event on the same level of cognitive distortion as the Great Disappointment occurred. A single tweet from 2 weeks prior predicted that black people across the globe would have their, quote, real DNA unlocked, and that the majority would be able to do things that we thought were fiction. Oh, we waited until that day of glory for 2 whole weeks. And well, I still don't have telekinesis or can control the weather, or at least fly yet. We do at least live in a time where seeing people that look like us appear larger than life in media is happening more than ever. Probably one of the best shows doing that right now on TV is The Boys on Amazon Prime. Imagine a world just like ours where superheroes walk among us. If you're not familiar, the show is based on a comic book series that explores a world just like ours, where someone like a Spider-Man or an Iron Man are living assets for corporations, even more so than they are in real life. Naturally, they're rock stars that relish in their fame, fortune, and fortitude. The majority of these superheroes, or supes as the show calls them, have vices like us. Only now, those vices are exacerbated by the ability to get away from any consequences of their actions. Now, we joke about Marvel heroes not really getting into any trouble for all the destruction that they cause, but this show really does showcase what it would be like if, the Hulk were to throw a truck into your living room or something like that. Due to all the collateral damage caused by these supes, a group is formed to basically go after not just the evil superheroes that go around, but the corporation that's heading them. Cue the title card. Yep. Like I said, the boys have 2 targets. One, the corporation that pretty much runs and oversees all the supes, Vought International, and the strongest team, the pretty much brand ambassadors of Vought. Pretty much the Avengers, Justice League of this world, the 7. The world's strongest is led by Homelander, quite literally one of the most unhinged characters I've ever seen on television. Rocking an American flag for a cape, Homelander represents current day America, with all its oppression and discrimination. Due to him being the strongest of all heroes, his unabashed patriotism and narcissism terrorize anyone on the opposite end of his hand. And that even includes other heroes a part of the 7. The existence of supes themselves is a great lens to use when we're talking about reimagining real-life stressors that marginalized communities face every day, like stakes-ancient violence, for instance. On both sides of the conflict, these characters have a desire to define themselves beyond their powers, or lack thereof, so that they can make the world a better place, or at least one that matches their image. It's only that some of these heroes and villains, as we come to find out as we watch the show, run into walls created by institutions and powers completely out of their control. So, just another day. We may not live in a world inundated with superhuman feats being achieved every day, but there have been genuine attempts to encourage people to recognize their individual and collective strength. Black power as a mainstream movement has been around since the 60s and 70s. In the thick of the civil rights movement, people used that slogan to define a desire for self-reliance and empowerment. Inequality was and still is a struggle that encapsulates many aspects, which is why if you ask anyone to define black power for themselves, you'll get a bunch of different answers. For simplicity's sake, let's use Huey Newton's definition. Black power is giving power to people who have not had power to determine their destiny. Both A-Train and Black Noir are 2 sides of the same coin. On one side, we have the fastest man alive, who embodies the entitled, snot-nosed privilege that supes throughout the boys exude. He feels like he comes from a humble background and turned into this just evil Icarus that flew too close to the sun. On the second side, we have Black Noir, the 7's most skilled hand-to-hand fighter. Throughout the majority of the show, he's without a doubt the character we know the least about on the team. We don't know what he looks like underneath his mask, and we never even hear him speak, which does contribute to his intimidating demeanor, but as a result, we don't ever really expect him to have an impact on the story. That is until the boys' Diabolical pops up. We're basically told that Black Noir is essentially a safety mechanism put in place by Vought in case Homelander goes berserk. Two of them end up forming an alliance though, being there for each other in case things go haywire, like murdering innocent citizens, which in this show, believe me, happens quite a lot. So if you haven't started wondering already, you're probably asking yourself, well damn, how did they get their powers on December 21st and I didn't? Calm down, black people. I got that answer for you. Compound V is a serum that is injected into people, well, babies more specifically, that gives whoever is injected with it powers. Very much similar to the super soldier serum used in the MCU. If you think that's wild, wait till I tell you it was created during the Third Reich. You know the Third Reich. VOD is essentially one of those companies that you like just don't scroll too far on their Wikipedia page for, unless, you know, you want to find some stuff that's not very satisfactory to read. With all this baggage, it can be kind of surprising to see black people, let alone people of color, working for a corporation like this. As one can imagine, some stuff that was pretty much made to make 4chan super soldiers is probably not good for your body. A-Train is revealed to have been dosing up on Compound V in Season 1, to the point where he's afraid of what he would become if he stopped taking it. Pretty much everyone, including Vought, his brother that coaches him in his early track days, and even his girlfriend, attempt to get him to slow down. After being found out by the boys for his abuse of V, A-Train decides to take matters into his own hands. Let's see here. He murders his girlfriend for ratting him out. He collapses during a fight with another hero, Starlight, eventually just because he suffers a heart attack due to the overuse. He does come back in Season 2 looking brand new, but it turns out he's still suffering heart palpitations. And they're so bad that if he ever uses his super speed again, he'll definitely 100% surely die. Noir's position in the 7 allows him to skate by pretty much on vibes without ever saying a word. His devotion to Vought almost has him appear like a mindless zombie, following the orders of people in higher command. A-Train walks on eggshells to get by, especially since he's powerless now. The difference between a model Negro and the nigga on his last strike. Just look at Homelander if you want an example of what happens if you conform or don't conform to power structure. Both of their very inclusion in Vought just feels like more like they're signing off a quota than anything else, which is as good as a point as any to mention that they're actually white in the comics. Not that their change in their races makes as much of a difference really, but it does recontextualize a lot of the things that happen to these characters. The advent of superpowered humans unfortunately still leaves room for regular human racism. Yay! If we think about it on a deeper metaphysical level though, these continuous tragedies and roadblocks facing the marginalized aren't floating around in a vacuum. These same ideologies that project the fear of black people into aspects of everyday life have only morphed and adapted to current sentiments held around the world. This framework is defined as Afro-pessimism, coined by Frank B. Wilderson, as a relationship between the racial binary established during slavery and how that viewpoint of black folk as a whole hasn't really progressed beyond that point. From Willie Horton to gerrymandering to the auction block, anti-blackness is the genetic material of this organism called the United States of America. We finally get to Season 3, where we're just now using a bunch of real life events to reflect the craziness of the past couple of years. We got a bunch of soups and guest starring celebs to sing John Legend's Imagine. John Lennon. Oh my goodness gracious. I actually wrote John Legend. That is funny. John Lennon's Imagine, like we saw at the beginning of the pandemic. We even got a parody of Kendall Jenner's Pepsi commercial with A-Train at the helm. With an environment built on the capital and optics of how one is perceived to the general public, it's not surprising to see A-Train desperate to use different angles of social justice to still be relevant. In a scene between A-Train and his brother discussing his career, he rightfully gets roasted for his blatant pandering to causes he never cared about before. When his brother suggests investigating a lower rank hero, Blue Hawk, for over-policing black neighborhoods, A-Train unsurprisingly responds with,
Listen, I'm Michael Jordan. I'm not Malcolm X.
The major threat of this season, however, is way larger than some lone wolf taking his job way too seriously. Soldier Boy, a powerful hero from decades past, died a hero when he saved the country from a nuclear power plant meltdown in the 80s. After some digging around in Russia, the boys make the educated guess that whatever could have killed Soldier Boy could potentially kill Homelander due to their similarities in strength. Rather than a weapon though, they instead find Soldier Boy, alive and cryogenically frozen. Soldier Boy was previously the leader of Payback, the old #1 team that Vought used in their propaganda. His supposed return from the dead shakes up everybody, including one particular Black Noir, who upon hearing that Soldier Boy is alive and running around and ready to kill everybody, he dips and even removes his tracking device as a result. Soldier Boy is a smorgasbord of metaphors in one character. For one, he can easily be compared to Captain America, all the way down to the shield and, good old white man who represents American values. Now, I know y'all have heard that joke where everyone talks about if Captain America were real, how, he'd probably be like the average white man from the 40s and be incredibly racist and misogynistic.
Racism is no more. For the most part. There still are subsets of the country where it's very much alive. If you want to go there, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, we know. He's supposed to be a Boy Scout who's pure-hearted, wouldn't embody those ideologies. Yeah. But Soldier Boy, on the other hand, is just that joke, just made manifest. Essentially the 80s Homelander, for lack of a better term. All the way down to shitting on minorities and not giving a fuck about women. And in particular, really not doing a good job with the black members a part of their team. A-Train's role in the Seven and Noir's in Payback were practically mirrors of each other. We even see in a flashback that Noir wanted to take his brand to the next level, getting red tape from Vought in response. He even wanted to remove his mask to get some more personal development and... well damn, he's actually black under there. It's actually through this flashback that we find out that the real truth behind Soldier Boy's demise was a little bit more complicated. See, during a CIA operation during the Iran-Contra conflict, Payback was invited to Nicaragua to showcase the potential usefulness of soups in the army. It went about as well as you think it would. So, all this stuff is going on, just, with the boys and Homelander, and it's just a mess, right? Meanwhile, A-Train is doing his thing, still trying to figure out, how am I gonna get myself relevant even though I don't have any powers? He and Vought are just throwing ideas at the wall, trying to see what sticks, including a documentary centered on him going to Africa and discovering his roots without physically being in Africa at all. Really honing in on that alienation from community that influencers have a lot. Homelander's still on his ass about virtually being powerless still, so A-Train is literally doing everything that he can to still get that leg up in the Seven, and that even includes being a class traitor. Supersonic, the newest member of the Seven, gets sold out by A-Train, and by proxy, also a plot for the group to band together and kill Homelander. He also uses his co-opting charm to get a semblance of relevance from using the issue of police brutality. He arranges to sit down with Blue Hawk, another ultra-nationalist, embarrassingly patriotic. I think there's a pattern here, but I don't know. What do y'all think? They both agreed to have a press conference so slapdash and staged that Al Sharpton would blush. It takes place in the midst of A-Train's home community, with all the hallmarks of a PR stunt made to absolve a privileged perpetrator from any consequences. That is, until rightfully angry people push against Blue Hawk's platitudes and whatnot, and, well, it goes about as well as you think it did.
All lives matter. All lives matter. Soup lives matter. Soup lives matter.
With his brother paralyzed and his rep in the hood most likely disintegrated, A-Train finally begins to develop a cognitive awareness of all the horrible things that he's done up to this point and how they negatively impact people as a whole. We get a long-awaited scene between him and Huey where Huey finally addresses the murder of his girlfriend and A-Train openly admits his wrongdoing? And then he gets punched. We then see A-Train enact his own form of hood justice for a purpose slightly besides his own for the first time pretty much in the entire show. He confronts Blue Hawk with the last burst of power that he can muster and drags that racist cop that couldn't be more of an allegory to right-wing nutjobs if he had a Tucker Carlson stand-in to defend his action. Oh well damn, wow, the boys really checked off all the lists, huh? Anyway, he dragged him so far that he pretty much turned into meat that was falling off the bone. Literally. Meanwhile, in an undisclosed location by himself, Black Noir is chilling. In actuality though, Noir is being surrounded and comforted by the greatest representation of creating a safe space I've seen in a minute. Animated characters. It seems throughout his whole life, and especially after the injuries he sustained in Nicaragua, Noir has adapted a coping mechanism where he imagines little cartoons that help him process emotions and traumatic events. It's a total tone shift that kind of masterfully recontextualizes everything we've seen him do and say throughout the entire show. And it also paints a full picture of what really happened all those years ago, what happened to Soulja Boy, and why Black Noir is so scary. Black Noir, along with the rest of Payback, hated pseudo-Captain America. The abusive environment that he fostered on the team is easily apparent to Mustard by the way that all the old members reenact his reemergence. But of course, Noir is arguably one of the worst cases of Soulja Boy's abuse head-on. In a flashback acted out by the animal characters in Noir's head, that's a weird sentence to say out loud, Soulja Boy is revealed to have ruined a big chance for Black Noir to be the lead actor in Beverly Hills Cop. Love those movies, but gotta say, it would have been really interesting to see Noir as Axel Foley. Anyway, we get an exchange between the two of them that can only be characterized as hard to watch. Soulja Boy berates Noir for even thinking that he could be successful as an actor, chastising his lack of comedy. And when Noir even attempts to retort, Soulja Boy beats him down, senselessly. And the rest of Payback is just there to watch. In a separate meeting with Vought's CEO, Black Noir is given the opportunity of a lifetime to rid himself of a thorn in his side and finally get the spotlight he deserves. The plan is simple enough. Trade Soulja Boy to the Russians, make room for his new replacement that has the same powers and American spirit, but just a little bit more corporate oversight. Noir and the rest of Payback band together and they fight Soulja Boy, the exact opposite of A-Train's choice. Unfortunately, Noir is the main one to get life-changing injuries, spilling his brain matter all over the place and permanently scarring him physically and mentally. The downfalls of both of these characters reveal the truth behind attempting to be accepted into structures not fully built for them to thrive. Simply put, they would never let a black person represent Vought, and by extension, America, without some caveats. You mean to tell me you want to create substantial change and liberation? Ha 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 ha. No. Black Noir, especially now that we have the backdrop of the 1980s, kind of represents that sentiment from then where black people just had to pull up their bootstraps and not sag their pants and stop listening to that hippity-hoppity music, and we'd sooner or later get a chance to overcome years and decades and centuries of oppression. A-Train, by contrast, is a modern shift of that model. A little bit more of, well, I'm black and I don't see an issue with all of this, and, racism doesn't affect me because I choose to not let it affect me. All that stuff. He can relate to the struggle, but he's at a point now where he's living the dream that people like Noir always wanted. He's just now separated from his community to the point where it takes literally being thrown into racial violence, that's partially his fault, to make a meaningful attempt to actually make change with his influence and power. And of course, it goes without saying that Homelander and Soulja Boy are pretty much mirrors, basically being the manifestation of American values that take advantage of black people who try to match up to them. Any effort by anyone who's not male, white, and hetero to move on up in society are subject to every and any setback. For them, the setback is their overwhelming strength and overreach, which makes the point of superheroes being basically super cops just stick a lot bit more, doesn't it? So at the initial height of the pandemic, when everybody was developing crippling TikTok addictions and had no idea where the world was heading and were completely inundated with the fact that everything just kind of had to stop, I was working. And no, I don't mean remotely. I mean going in every single day. I even had this little piece of paper that I had to keep in the glove compartment of my car just in case any cops had stopped me and were trying to force me to go home due to all the mandates going on. That basically, made me an essential worker. so that I wouldn't get arrested and I could still work. And yeah, this was one of those jobs that just sucked. Not necessarily because of like the actual work there. I thought the work was fine. It was just more so the work environment. One of those environments where like in the job interview, they tell you that everybody's like a family, which is like 5 red flags in one. This was an internship, so I wasn't getting paid that much and it was only part-time, but you know, it was still good to have, you know, on my resume, and if I wanted to have some type of leeway when it came down to actually having a career once I graduated. And then the pandemic happened, so I took on more hours and, you know, took on more work as a result so that I could, you know, gain more money, but also gain more of a good look to my bosses, and eventually, you know, sooner or later get a full-time job once I actually graduated. By the end of 2020, I was essentially just doing all the work of a full-time employee, but getting paid the same as a part-time intern. And this is while I'm doing like Zoom classes, like in the office. I'm like going in my breaks and like doing homework, you know, because class is like at the same time as work now. And so, do I actually receive a reward for all this hard work? Do I get like some type of trinket or certificate? Do I at least get the full-time job for all my effort after I graduate and do all these things and, you know, put in all this work? Absolutely not. Basically, I was told that I didn't have what it took to have a full-time job. Honestly, I know what that meant though. If they could have somebody doing all the work of somebody that was full-time while still paying them chump change and squeezing out all the alienation from their labor as much as they could, that was going to be always way more profitable. And that's where A-Train and Black Noir find themselves, climbing up a ladder that has no support underneath. And the reason behind their lack of support is baked into society long before they could ever make a drop in the metaphorical ocean. Black Noir literally visualizes himself as a black sheep that has yet to get the chance to shine. And even after getting rid of Soldier Boy, it's at the sacrifice of bodily functions and everyone moving on past him anyway. He tries to address the issue head on, but is literally stopped in his tracks by the representation of the same repressive work environment for a new generation. Which, by the way, goddamn, I really hope y'all ain't do my boy like that. Like, all this character development, you know, we find out that he's actually black, great things, you know, I'm really liking his character. And then y'all do him like that? Like, y'all, I really hope y'all ain't doing him like that. I don't know how y'all bringing him back. A-Train wakes up in the hospital after killing Blue Hawk. Not only is he alive now, but he's been given a heart transplant, single-handedly jump-starting his dead career. At the expense of having a beating heart of a flaming racist placed inside of him, of course. He goes up to his brother after healing to share the good news, ready to have him by his side like the good old days. But A-Train's brother isn't having all that. He sees right through him and his enforcement of hood justice for the selfish act that it truly was. No, frankly, I don't know. This is kind of one of those bad things that kind of ended up having a good consequence in the end. Like, I'm not shedding any tears because Blue Hawk is, you know, hello. You live in a world with superheroes that do all types of crazy stuff. In what world did you think that they were going to arrest this man and put him in jail and, like, you know, he was going to face the consequences of his actions? Okay. But it still stands that A-Train has always looked out for himself and still does. Even in the face of everything telling him to get out before it's too late. Even when the most probable representation of his future, showcased by someone who's lived a similar life to him in his past, is killed, I really hope y'all ain't do my boy like that. He jumps right back in the moment he's able to live off his grift a little bit longer. Well, at least he's still getting his The Blind Side movie.
Don't go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and... Hi. So if you are here, I'm assuming it's because either you somehow lost your way down the YouTube rabbit hole, or you've come to see people like me and the homie Hiro overanalyze fictional characters for your delight. Well, you've come to the right place, bucko. Or maybe you haven't, in which case, kick rocks and die. So because I don't want to spend too much time chewing up scenery talking about stuff that I've already talked about in my own video on the boys, and if I haven't talked about it there, I probably am going to talk about it in the next one. I'm going to focus on the task at hand and expound a little bit on one of my favorite characters in the whole series, that being Mother's Milk. And I know that a lot of you are probably just looking for analysis on the main characters, but MM is so bossed up that we got to give him his own due, right? So if I want Mother's Milk, then doggone it, I'm going to get me some Mother's Milk. That came out a lot more awkward than I expected it to. MM personifies racial and more specifically black trauma in America. I mean, that much is obvious, isn't it? But more than that, what he also represents is black people's seemingly perpetual fight against the systems and institutions that have caused our condition, while simultaneously fighting like hell not to allow that trauma to consume us wholly. See, for me at least, MM's most telling character trait is not his absolute bad mofo-ness, but it's his cautiousness, not to be confused with caucasity, something that I'm sure Hiro will probably talk about later if he hasn't already. Remember this line from season 2?
But it's not about me. I can't lash out like some raging entitled maniac. That's a white man's luxury.
Yeah, that reality is put on no better display than in the contrasting natures of Billy Butcher and the closest thing he's probably had in life to a best friend that doesn't come in either a plastic Ziploc or a brown paper bag. Butcher, though calculated at least to a certain degree in his approach, at the end of the day isn't above just shoving a C4 payload up the aft end of the invisible voyeur and then worrying about cleaning the mess up later.
Big lump of C4, peg right up his fudger. Boom, claret everywhere. Fucking diabolical.
MM, on the other hand, is excluded from being that reckless. And the reason why is because being a black man in America has taught him that if he does not plan every move he makes down to the absolute jot and tittle, then more than likely things are going to go sideways. And when they do, he's more than likely going to be on the losing end of that. Also, we see how MM, unlike most of the other quote-unquote good guys in the show, does not hesitate to cut off an estranged ally like a gangrenous penis. And that is because, again, MM's blackness has taught him against taking half measures, especially when it comes to something like the pursuit of social justice. This is why he's so hostile to Frenchie during the first season, even without knowing why French bailed on the homies in the first place. This is also why, after getting one too many whiffs of his BS, he's just about ready to drill Billy Boy's brains against a brick wall. And this is also why he's so cautious about allying with a soup against soups. So yeah, like I said earlier, as on the nose as it is, MM is representative of black people's shared trauma and our continuous struggle against not only that trauma, but the systems and institutions that created it, while again trying our best to prevent that trauma from consuming us. And then we have to deal with chinless half-wits like Todd here on what seems like a daily basis, whose sheer unapologetic stupidity and compulsion to infect the people around them with it causes us to lose it and come out of character. And because this is America after all, when we do that, we're usually the ones being chastised for not being the bigger person. Yeah, exactly. And that's pretty much all I got for y'all today, folks. If you want to hear me explain how A-Train is pretty much just a living Blackout Tuesday square, or how Huey is pretty much every incel you've ever met, then why don't you come check out my channel and click on those videos. Seriously, go watch them now. I need the money, like, badly. I owe a very scary Italian man a very large amount of money. Help. Please.
Appreciate that, Billiam. Make sure y'all check out his channel though. It might have an inclusion from your boy if all cars go together, if you know what I mean. Despite not having any powers, MM's character arc has a huge influence on the direction of the story. Being the medic and emotional crutch of the team, he presents one of the few corners of levity when surrounded by carnage. This doesn't last long though, as his part in the boys endangers his family, forcing them to go into witness protection, and eventually leading him to divorce his wife Monique. His relationship with his daughter Janine is also strained from him getting caught up in work. But by the start of season 3, the boys are only still incrementally closer to taking down Homelander and Vought. To create some sort of semblance of normalcy for his family, MM quits the boys and gets on SSRIs for his OCD and depression. This of course can't last long though, and MM finds himself right back in the middle of the conflict. The conflict in season 3 though is way bigger than anybody could have anticipated. Turns out that Soulja Boy is directly responsible for pretty much all of Mother's Milk's trauma. When MM was a kid, he noticed Soulja Boy outside his window chastising some kids. And in an instant, a car was flown into the apartment he and his family were in, killing everyone except him instantly. Another conflict arises when Butcher and Huey end up dosing on a variant of Compound V, V24, granting them abilities for 24 hours. Kinda hypocritical to be using powers to take down people with powers, but I mean, I kinda get trying to level the playing field in a type of way. But MM is headstrong in his ideals, chastising the two of them when they use V24. His whole point is that pretty much everything that they're doing is to prevent anyone from using that kind of power, rather than just continuing the cycle. Definitely giving magical Negro vibes, especially considering his comic counterpart actually had powers. You'd think they'd have a little bit more sensitivity surrounding MM's PTSD and, you know, maybe try and find another way to kill Homelander, but yeah, no. His concerns are pushed straight to the side. Huey and Butcher strike a deal with Soulja Boy and cut MM out. Throughout the whole season, there's actually a whole lot of that. Every time MM mentions general distrust and fear of the situation going wrong, they gaslight him. Every time he tries to call out the blatant fakeness showcased by Supes and the like, he's recommended a Facebook group to learn real truth. Which, speaking of which, Todd. How did Monique end up with Todd? Like, he looks like the average attendant of a Turning Point USA convention. He looks like the type of person to energetically scream, "Here!" at the Capitol riots or whatever. So MM is forced to find his own way to justice, even within the same org that's supposed to hold these superpower extensions of the state in check. Even if it means scoring up on a suit with no care for any life that isn't his own. It's a little bit ridiculous, but I mean, what if you could scrap with the physical manifestation of your anxiety and depression, or at least the direct source of it? I don't know about y'all, but I'm putting hands, feet, elbows on that. The difference between his version of justice and someone like A-Train lies between the motivations. MM at no point thinks that getting rid of Soulja Boy, Homelander, or even Vought means that everything will be all better. The amount of damage perpetuated by Vought and everyone they empower is too great to sum up in just taking out a couple bad apples and chopping down a couple trunks of the tree. The fight that MM is a part of is way larger than him and requires deforesting the whole forest in a whole non-destroying the environment, pro-climate change kind of way. MM's father pretty much spent his whole life dedicated to pursuing justice against Soulja Boy and Vought for what they did. And of course, he dies, never really being able to achieve that. And we see that MM adopts this mission for himself and pretty much embodies that in everything that he does, from standing up to CO officers in the Marines to being a counselor for kids that are in prison. Which is a good segue as any to answer the question that I guess this video is just trying to pose. In 2013, an open letter addressing recent attempts for extradition was written by Sada Shakur from exile in Cuba. As an activist, she was a member of both the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army, participating in everything from protests to mutual aid efforts. Being caught up with groups and orgs like the Panthers, it's not surprising that she found herself being COINTELPRO'd. wiretapping, being followed by the police, that type of thing. Her life culminated in a shootout between police and some fellow Black Panthers in 1973. She was arraigned from her hospital bed despite suffering from gunshot wounds and abuse at the hands of police present in her room, and it didn't even end once they placed her in various maximum security prisons, including Rikers. But after her imprisonment and subsequent escape, she pens this letter with the sentence, "My name is Asada Shakur, and I am a 20th century escaped slave." Pretty much throughout the whole letter, she's talking about all the stuff that she's been through and, how much a lot of that was and how much power she doesn't really have by herself to begin with to challenge a lot of these power structures that allow these things to happen in the first place. But she also realizes that she still has her voice and a will to tell the truth. In one of the final seasons of the season, MM comes clean to his daughter about everything. And this means the trauma, the Lexapro, the boys, everything. He's come to the consensus that rather than failing to hide the reality of his lived experiences, he should be vulnerable and tell the truth. Soups are horrible, they killed a lot of her family, Homelander is actually a Nazi's wet dream, the works. And Janine's response is the sweetest thing ever.
You're my hero, Daddy.
Maybe it was a form of comfort, a form of the kid parenting the parent in a kind of way. After all, this whole conversation just kind of bogs down as this show's version of the talk. The talk. The one that pretty much every parent has, or at least should have, with their black kids, surrounding police. The talk. The one where you don't walk into stores with hoods on or leave your hands on top of the wheel if you get pulled over talk. The talk. But it also does put a bow on an attempt to undo generational curses. It's a commitment to challenge all these hierarchies put in place by people way older than us. Oftentimes when people from marginalized communities discuss empowerment, it can sometimes derail itself into talking about how people need to just get a seat at the table. It's just unfortunate that a lot of these tables at a lot of these institutions aren't really built for distributing power amongst us all, if you catch my drift. We just need to be a lot more wary of the kind of power creep that gaining a leg up in corporate or gaining a large success in your influencer career can bring. Which means committing to not using the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. Word to Audre Lorde. Generally speaking, we have nothing to lose but our chains. And, when you realize that and everyone else realizes that, shoot, that's real power. And you can't imagine how unstoppable you'd be with that. Woo! Made it through this video. I really appreciate you for sticking by to the end, however long this is, because I just know this is just pre-editing me, so I just know this is going to be really long. But I appreciate you sticking by. Shout out to Lil Billion for helping me out with this video. Make sure y'all check out his channel. All the links to social media and all that stuff down below. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. Thank you for watching. I'll see y'all later. Drink y'all water. Peace.
MACROSS.